This is Kevin. I am here again with another interview for you guys, trying to help you learn how to learn English. I am interviewing various friends of mine around Brazil who have successfully or are successfully learning English. Not the typical way, not by focusing on a school or someone else to magically give them English, but taking control and learning how to teach themselves English. It is possible for everybody. You just have to know how to do it. So I'm going to talk to Marcio today and ask him some questions, basic questions about his English experience and what he has done to reach the very advanced level of English that he is at currently. Again, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good, good.
Yeah.
And let's get right into it. So first, your name is Marcio, and tell me a little bit about yourself, so some basic information.
Yes, I'm Brazilian. I am an English teacher here in São Paulo. I've been teaching English for 10 years.
All right, sure.
Yeah.
10 years teaching English. And what kind of schools do you teach in?
I teach in private schools, privately, and public schools as well.
All right, so you have a pretty full schedule, I would imagine.
That's right, yes.
English every day, right?
I try to, especially in public schools. It's
Yeah,
kind
sure.
of, it's
Yeah.
a little bit difficult, but I try
Right.
to. I'll do my best, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's good. In an English class, it's kind of nice to have actually English in the class, but I know public schools here are not always that way, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Sure. So you've been teaching for English for 10 years. How long, I guess, including this time, because you're obviously always learning, right?
Yeah, all the time, every single day, I think so.
And how long have you been learning? How long had you been learning English before becoming a teacher?
Approximately 15 years.
Oh, okay, wow, sure.
Yeah,
So 15 years before becoming a teacher, you studied.
that's right. Especially because when I was in a high school, I studied technical course. So because of that, I just had English during my first year.
Right, so you kind of stopped
Yeah, that's
studying
right.
for some time. Sure.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit more. When you started, of course, some schools, they force you to take English class, but at the public schools or whatever, usually the courses that they offer for free are pretty worthless, right?
Yeah.
You decided to spend a lot more time and a lot more of your life learning English. Can you tell me why and how this happened, and kind of tell me the history of when you started?
Yeah, I started when I was 11 years old, when I had my first contact with the English language. And I was amazed with the teacher speaking English inside the classroom. I said, oh my God, how wonderful is this language? I'm so
Right.
curious to
Sure.
learn about this. And when I had this first contact, I started trying to read some sentences because I had no idea any vocabularies, specific or single words. So because of that, I tried to imitate foreign people speaking English in front of the mirror. I started listening to songs and tried to repeat that sentences. And I looked up the translations of the words or the sentence, and I try to use that words in my real life.
Interesting. So it sounds like you kind of, the first methods you used was trying to imitate the sounds of English. Would you say that?
Yeah,
Yeah, because you imitating English or speaking to yourself in the mirror probably wasn't very good English, I would imagine, huh?
yeah, but not in my case because I
Yeah,
was starting. So
just
I
a
was in
beginner.
front. Yeah, that's right. I was in front of the mirror and I said like
Sure.
this.
Very cool, because there's language is sound, right? If you learn the sounds of of a language, and if you start from there, it can be very helpful. Because it is like music. And you said you also listened to music and tried to imitate the
Yes.
lyrics, right? Yeah.
Sometimes I used to use the sentence that I learned in the with some songs, and I try to speak like a native people. I
Yeah, sure.
transform from music to a spoke language, you know?
Yeah, sure. Imitation
Yes.
is a great way. Absolutely. And you liked it from the beginning. You enjoyed it. So this sounds like a fun way to practice English. Is actually just trying to imitate the lyrics, the songs, right?
Yes, I think one tip is good for everyone who wants to try English or
Hmm.
to become fluent. I think one tip is one of the most tips are you speak a little English every day. I think it helps you memorize, internalize, or you don't
Mm,
forget the words, you know. I think
sure.
it helps a lot.
And so, and you said this is probably your biggest tip, and a lot of people would think, oh, but I need somebody to talk to, and I don't have anybody to speak English with, so I can't speak every day. Would you agree you need somebody to speak with if you're going to speak every day?
Yes, all the time. I try to or say a word or try to write a sentence or maybe, I don't know, find a native speaker who is willing to exchange some times or speak in English with you and you maybe can exchange uh, a language.
Sure.
Uh,
What if you don't have anybody to speak to every day? Can you still practice speaking?
yes,
How?
uh,
How could you practice speaking, or as in your case, maybe singing, without somebody in front of you?
yes, maybe try to create a conversation
Hmm.
when you are interviews when you are asking or you
Hmm.
are talking about the weather, maybe try imitating you are talking to on the telephone, you know,
Sure.
asking questions using their appropriate vocabularies according to this kind
Yeah.
of conversation.
Yeah, so kind of you kind of pretend, fingir, like you're having a conversation
Yes, all the time,
with
especially
somebody.
because here in Brazil, in São Paulo, we don't have native speaker or
Hmm.
native English people walking on the street, you know. So
Sure.
it's very difficult to say, oh, I'm learning English at school. Now I'm going on the street, I'll walk, and I'll find most of them to speak with me. No.
Right. Yeah, sure. So you can, and I've done this in Portuguese. You have a conversation in your head with yourself, right? You can
Yes.
speak, and like you said, you pretend that you're having a conversation in a certain situation, but you don't need to do it out loud. You can do it out loud, or you can just do it in your head. You have two people, um, imaginary people, and kind
That's
of pretend
right.
that you're doing something. Yeah.
And
So,
nowadays, we have loads of course that can help with this kind of self-studies because now we have online dictionaries that you can, if you don't know how to pronounce the word, it helps. You have Google, you have the internet in general, and it helps a lot.
sure. And this is an interesting point because you started learning 15 years ago, so it was much more difficult for you.
Yes, completely. I think I just had books around me to help me,
You just had books basically, and maybe
textbooks.
music on the radio. So you successfully learned English very well, and at that time you didn't even have the internet. These days, with the internet, like you said, it's 100 times easier
Yeah.
to find resources.
Now you have another opportunity to work on your pronunciation. If you say,
Sure.
"Oh, this word like this word pronounced like this," and you have a resource to help you say, "No, this is like this. It's that way," so you can repeat it.
Sure, and then before, like in a dictionary, you could learn the phonetic alphabet and learn how to pronounce a certain syllable. But these days, who wants to do that? It's a horrible process. Now you can simply go online, find the word, see how it sounds, and learn it that way. Sure. So very cool. So what I got from that too is speaking every day is very important, and you don't have to find somebody else necessarily to speak with. You can be creative and either speak to yourself in the mirror, to have conversations in your head. Any other ways, creative ways you could practice speaking? I know somebody who who used to take English lessons from a book, and then she would pretend that she was giving class to fake students, imaginary students. Maybe it was her dolls or some pets or whatever.
Yes.
And pretend she was giving class to the room. It sounds crazy, but it's also very smart and very powerful, because you are learning so much more by teaching something, right?
Yeah, or maybe try to do as example as web seminar or maybe a seminar. You study a topic and you talk to, I don't know, imaginary person, or maybe you talk to a friend, explain this.
Right.
Another way, I think I use this until now. When I learn, I always learn, and you used to write this word in a post-it, and I put it on the object. For example, I learned the new vocabulary, and at the beginning my room was like a madhouse, because everyone who entered in my room, they saw the post-it like in a TV and a computer,
Right. Post-it notes. How would you say post-it note in Portuguese? It's the same thing, post-it.
Yes, because the trademark is post-it.
Yeah, it's a brand,
Yeah.
Post-it note. So you put post-it notes everywhere. I think seeing the word many, many times over and over and over with the actual object helps a lot. Huh?
Yeah, until you are familiar with it.
Sure.
After that, you can throw it out.
So you obviously knew how to integrate English into your everyday life. What do you think kept you motivated for so long to continue practicing and studying? Because this is a problem. A lot of people, they'll start for some weeks or some months. They'll be excited. Then they aren't happy because they aren't fluent after a few months. So they stop and they do absolutely nothing, which is the worst possible thing you can do, is to completely stop. What did you do when you were learning back in the day to keep you motivated, to keep you going?
Well, in my case in specific, I can say because now I have native friends, so because of that, I have to talk to them in English all the time, and because now when I speak to my students, I tell them, we know that English language is the lingua franca.
Sure.
It's the spoken English, spoken language. This language is spoken all around the world. So I think this is important, especially because now we are in a World Cup time. So because of that, we need to speak in English with foreign people, because it depends on the country the people are from. They just speak English, whatever they other speak, other language they speak.
Right.
I think we need to communicate in English specifically.
So the necessity of obviously if you just want to stay home and not really do much, you probably don't need English. But as soon as you want to go out and meet people and possibly travel outside of the U.S. or work in a company that needs English, obviously you have to learn. So this is the motivation. Huh?
Yes.
It's not really a choice these days for a lot of people.
We are involved
in
English in general with manual of some gadgets, music, songs in general.
English is a part of everybody's life these days. Absolutely. So now, because it is a necessity, and I agree it is a necessity, what can somebody do, especially with the internet, because it makes things so much easier, and maybe you can go into some of the things that you do these days, or some of your good students do. What can you do to take this necessity? Okay, for a lot of people, they think it's chato. Inglês é chato, mas é preciso aprender. They think this way. So what advice do you have for somebody who doesn't like English, has to learn English, and they need to do it? What tips or advice do you have for them on how to become good enough in English to have a conversation?
I think when they have the first contact with the language, I think it's a good way they understand that something is necessary. The language is necessary to learn. So when they attend an English class or they take part in a discussion group, when they realize that it's important and they have to learn it, I think it's a good way. Not because your boss orders you, not because your boss wants you to learn this language. I think when you are forced to do something, probably you stop in the middle of the road.
Yeah. So find a situation where you're active in the language and you can actually see the language being used. Thinking of your students, private students or from the school, are there any of them that you can think of specifically that are more efficient or better at learning, and possibly what they do to become better?
Yeah, it's just yesterday I had a curious case because a friend of a student of mine, he was last week he was telling me, "Oh, Marcio, I'm so frustrated because I can't practice English even in my work because I don't use it, but I'd love to practice. I don't have native friends or someone else." And yesterday he went to the stage of Itaquerão to trying to find English people there because he wanted to talk to them or maybe exchange some words in English.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and he found a friend of him in the Itaquerão station. And this friend invited him to enter in the stage and watch a match.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, between England and, I don't know.
Chile, maybe.
No, Uruguay.
No, Uruguay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And he was,
sure.
yeah, he was fascinated because he seated among the English supporters, you know.
Sure.
He had to speak English all the time with them. He made some English friends then. He texted me saying, "Marcio, it was amazing. Now I really need to learn English. I think English is my life from that moment on." Say, "Oh, great. That's great.
Cool.
You had this kind of experience."
And it's very cool. And he if he didn't have the courage to go to the stadium and see what happened, he wouldn't have experienced that. Huh?
Yeah,
so
he was kind of fascinated because of that.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I don't know if the English that he learned from the British fans at a soccer game is the most appropriate, best English to learn. But at least he could see how the English is used in action.
Yeah, the funny thing is, he told me that, "Oh, Mars, they said too much bad words." Say, "Oh, of course,
that's
you're
right.
on a stage."
Sure. If he learned English,
not in a church.
If he's going to learn English from a soccer game from British fans, probably will only be able to use that English in a few situations. But it's a joking, but that's a great example, and I think, and that's something we've talked about before. He obviously left his comfort zone, went to a very challenging situation, and I'm sure he was a little nervous about it. But because he did that, he got the benefits, and he got to go to a football game, hang around a bunch of crazy British fans. They're very cool, huh?
Yeah, especially because we don't practice so much. Even for us who teach or who speaks English sometimes, if you don't for a long time, probably when you start speaking again, it blocks us, you know.
Yeah.
You feel blocked. You say, "Oh my God."
Quickly. Yeah, I think if I don't speak Portuguese for a couple of weeks, I already notice that it goes down. So
yeah, it happens.
You have to, but at least nowadays, and like we were talking about, you can practice every day, and you don't have to be with somebody. You can be creative online. There's so many different ways. I use in my classes sometimes with my services is students can record their voices speaking, and they send them to me, and we have a conversation this way. And then you don't have to be with a person. You can actually just you can converse virtually, which more and more with technology, we'll be able to use these technologies to practice from anywhere at any time.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. One thing that's hard when you're learning alone and you know how to, you have good methods, you're consistent, you're practicing every day. One thing I think that's difficult for some people is how do they know they're better if they don't have people to speak with that are better than them? Do you have any opinion on that, or any methods what are your thoughts on that? How do you evaluate yourself, or how do you stay motivated if you don't really know if you're improving?
Yes, as I told you, I love this kind of a challenge, and I make I do my best every single day. I try to improve my writing, my reading, or my listening skills. A good way, I think we should make an effort to listen to, for example, the podcasts or radio shows for at least maybe 20 minutes a day,
Okay.
or try to watch a series. They have about 20 minutes an episode. Do it. You can do it in the gym, on your commute to work, or while you are sitting at your computer.
Hmm.
I think when you make an effort to understand what's being said, don't let the English wash over you, if you find it too fast. I think we need to try to pick out the keywords and phrases to get a general idea, or what the conversation is about.
Hmm.
I think if you do these little things
Hmm.
every single day, I think you keep the English alive inside of us.
Okay. And keeping the English alive, and this is what I've heard from a lot of people, and I agree with it. If you are constantly, like you said, focusing on what you can do each day, listening 20 minutes, watching a series for 20 minutes, then you're constantly focused on that. You're not worried about the future, or how good you are, or how much you're improving. If you are constantly working at it and putting any effort, you will know that it becomes easier to understand. Audio, you can start understanding and following a whole series, and over time, you naturally the things become easier, right? Without worrying about, oh, I'm not good enough, I don't speak well enough, what am I doing? It's just more about focusing on what can I do today to improve, to practice. Would you agree with that?
Yes, of course, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And for example, when you say a sentence in your mother tongue, for example, I think good way you try to, how can I convert this sentence in, for example, in language, you know? I think it helps because this sentence that we use in our daily lives, it take part of our routine. So according this, you can improve your vocabulary. You can improve your English skills in general, because you are saying sense words, sense sentence, and real sentence.
Yeah,
That,
sure. Phrases, full phrases,
yes,
real English. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. I'm going to finish things here. We've gotten a lot of good insights from you. And I guess just to wrap this up, let's say you're talking to somebody who's beginning English, who might be a beginner, or let's say a low level, and they don't know what to do when they are at home or during their day to improve. If you could give them any tip, and you kind of already have, but maybe just to summarize, tell this person, okay, this is what you should do, and eventually you will be good at English. Is there anything specific you would say, or how would you talk to this person?
I would say that for this person, that they never give up. They don't think
Yeah.
that oh, I'm so old, I think I don't have enough time to English. No, I would say that better late than never. So I think
Perfect. Sure.
everyone has the opportunity to learn English,
Mm-hmm.
be persistent,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
read the English, try to read some English books or newspaper or magazine, or try to listen to for 5 minutes at least. Try to understand what is happening. Try to understand the gist, the general idea of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the headlines, the story of something.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we start doing this, you can go
Go
ahead.
as far as you need to go. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Now that's great, and that's wonderful. Like, don't ever give up. Don't ever stop. Right?
Yeah. Never.
Just and English is such a part of our lives these days. You almost have to choose to not connect with English. It's almost like a decision. I don't want to see English. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Because if
Yes.
you don't choose that, you'll see it everywhere. So as long as you accept it and you're always thinking about it, you will be improving and then become a fluent speaker. Yeah?
Yeah, I would say don't avoid English. Try to
Sure.
face it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Should face it, become friends with it, make it a good thing, not an enemy. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool. So, that's it. Anything else you want to say about anything?
No, I don't think so. I think that's all.
Again, thank you very much. My objective with this is to help other people basically become friends with English if they're not. And I think you've given plenty of good insights to help them today. So again, thank you very much for spending your time with me. And we will keep in touch. And that's it. All right?
Yeah, thank you for helping us to improve our English skills because I always follow your tips that pub- to publish online.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great, and that's all. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Marcio.
Bye.
Bye-bye.